Good evening, everybody. This is your wonderful host, James Krasnerick, here with another live podcast of Real Steel Sports. The off-season for the NFL is now underway. It's been a week since the Ravens defeated the 49ers in Super Bowl 47 in New Orleans. Free agency starts next month. And there are already several stories going around the NFL. Different teams already trying to build their rosters, releasing players and this and that, and trying to decide what the best course of action is for them to compete for a chance to be in Super Bowl 48. There's some, news coming out nowadays. Some interesting things every now and then. Really won't get into the thick of it, and it won't be really interesting till free agency hits. Then all the fun stuff starts to happen. And I'm going to have a field day with that. But got some interesting news so far. The Minnesota Vikings are currently looking to trade their coming fifth-year wide receiver Percy Harvin to whatever team wants to pick him up. It is believed that a tirade involving Harvin and head coach Leslie Frazier in front of the whole team has been the reason as to why Harvin was really placed on injured reserve, not just for a bum ankle. He at times has been out of control since he's been in Minnesota, the 4 years he's been there. And I'm sure plenty of teams will want to take a shot at him. Very talented receiver, and he's a very, very good kickoff returner as well. So definitely that'd be something that I think a lot of teams would be interested in. If I had to pick, I'll get into the free agency, and the cap things later. But I'll just continue to go with my headlines first. The Jacksonville Jaguars have now changed their logo. And in my opinion, it doesn't look too bad. I mean, the ears are not black, they're propped up. It's a little more detailed than it was. It looks a lot less vicious. It looks kind of cartoony. The Jaguars, of course, this year have the second pick overall in the 2013 NFL Draft. Much speculation about who they're going to take. Well, at least they got a new logo. Hopefully they'll bring some more fans in. Maybe they can finally get 10,000 people to go to a game. Poor attendance down there. Michael Turner is potentially very, very close to being released by the Atlanta Falcons. Michael Turner had played 5 years in Atlanta, has been to the Pro Bowl several times, and had over 800 yards and 10 touchdowns rushing last year. He's due to be paid over $6 million, and to free up cap space, the Falcons are looking at a potential ability to let him go. The Cleveland Browns are more than likely not going to get Patriots backup quarterback Ryan Mallett. Ryan Mallett played college football at Arkansas, and he was the third-round pick from the New England Patriots in 2011, and he has yet to play much at all in the NFL. I think that Ryan Mallett was potentially one of the better quarterbacks in that draft. You had Dalton, you had Newton in that draft. You had so many good players, and he was, I think, the one guy that got overlooked. Ponder's another one. He got overlooked, because of some kind of nagging little issues with himself emotionally. But I think he could potentially be a very, very capable starting quarterback in this game. The Steelers are not expected to pursue free agent offensive linemen Ramon Foster and Max Starks in free agency, and they're also expected to part ways with longtime offensive lineman Willie Colon. Colon has spent much of the last 3 years injured and has not had a chance to play, and when he has played, he's only been fairly productive. Certainly not what the Steelers have expected. The 2013 team, it's going to be interesting to see what they have in regards to salary cap. Because you're obviously looking to try to build up your roster, but it's only half the battle. You also got to get rid of dead weight on the roster in order to make up room to sign better players. And there are two teams in my mind that when it comes to it, have a very, very good chance to to make some big moves this offseason. There are several teams, actually. For one, it's the Miami Dolphins. They have $35.8 million in cap space. The Bengals have $55 million. The Browns have $48.9 million, and the Indianapolis Colts $46 million. Those four teams in the AFC right now, 3 of the 4. I gave last night. A couple nights ago, I did my previews of the NFL for next year, and I said Miami was my sleeper team in the AFC. I did not know that they had that much space. I thought they had a lot, but they've got plenty of space. And if you really look at, the free agents out there, I mean, they're already set at running back because they've got Lamar Miller and Daniel Thomas, who are two very capable running backs, who I think can be a good 1-2 punch in Miami. Maybe get about 75 yards a game between them. Well, yeah, I'm not going to go up there with projection. I'm just going to say that I think that those two will be very capable nonetheless. But if you look at the skill position players out there, I mean, they have the ability to sign, their left tackle Jake Long to a long-term deal. But look at what they have to possibly pick from in terms of free agency. They have Greg Jennings, who played for the Dolphins head coach Joe Philbin when Philbin was the offensive coordinator in Green Bay for how many years? Mike Wallace, speed demon, could really be a field. It could be a defensive, opener for the Dolphins. They could really loosen up some defenses with that guy, and maybe go underneath a few times. That Wallace could really be a guy that could help out Miami. And besides, they have enough space that because he wants to get paid, even though he doesn't deserve it really. Dwayne Bowe, who is a hell of a talented wide receiver. There are really so many good players out there. I'm just listing these guys because they really do have the ability, more or less, to make Ryan Tannehill into a better quarterback. I mean, he didn't have a great rookie year, but he had a very good one. One that I think is one you can build on, especially when he did it with such a half-assed receiving core. When Brian Hartline's your best receiver, then your quarterback did well if he had a decent season throwing. Because Hartline wasn't going to be doing anything for that team. Yeah, he had that one great game against Arizona, but other than that, didn't do squat. I mean, but the one team that I'm really concerned about, obviously, is my favorite team. It's my team, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and what they're going to do. Because you lose Foster, Starks, and Cologne, like I mentioned. Cologne is not a huge loss because, besides, he's been injured the last 3 years. I mean, as much as we'd love to all have him see the field, he's been injured. And whenever he hasn't been in there, it's not like the offensive line's performed any worse. Foster's been a very capable lineman since the day we drafted him, and we helped mold him into not a Pro Bowler, obviously, not even close, but still a guy who's capable and can do his job very efficiently. Then you have Max Starks, who really was the linchpin to really hold down the blind side of Ben Roethlisberger for 4 or 5 years. I mean, when Marvell Smith retired, Max Starks took over that side and really helped solidify it. It's kind of funny because if Starks comes back next year and they have Pouncey and Gilbert in that offensive line, 3 of their 5 stars will be from Florida. It's pretty impressive to see how good they are churning out linemen. I mean, the Steelers, they've got a lot of work that they need to do. They really do. And their free agency, they're in a real pickle when it comes to free agency. I mean, if you just look at all the guys they have to worry about, I mean, not just, guys like Wallace that I mentioned before. But if you look at the Steelers situation in general, they're well over the cap. I mean, that's a really bad thing for the Steelers to be that far over the cap. They are $14 million above it right now, and they've not brought back a single one of their free agents. I mean, if you look at some of these players and what they're due to make next year, Ben's due to make over $11 million, which I'm sure he'll be fine. He won't mind restructuring. Woodley will probably help restructure. Troy, I think, is going to have to restructure. But the guy that I really don't expect to see back next year is James Harrison, because he's due over $6.5 million. That's not a total I think the Steelers want to pay their aging outside linebacker. I know Harrison's been a great player for us, but, his time may have come. And if you look at the free agents, you've got running back Rashard Mendenhall, obviously Mike Wallace, and even other players like cornerback Keenan Lewis. They could potentially lose 2 or 3 of their best players in that team. And I said it from the get-go, I don't think the Steelers are going to make the playoffs this year, and that's going to be the reason why. The salary cap is ultimately going to be their enemy. You got a team like Miami looking for players. You got teams like Cincinnati who's well under the cap, who's got plenty of money to spend. Cleveland. Indianapolis, who was just a playoff team, can get all the weapons in the world for Andrew Luck. Don't be surprised next year if Mike Wallace is a Colt. The chance to play with Andrew Luck, the chance to get paid, he probably won't pass up a number like a team like that. It'd be foolish to. When it comes to issues now with the salary cap and this and that, you look at last year, the Steelers really didn't lose anybody big. And again, they were well over the cap. Do I expect them to be able to resign Wallace and Mendenhall? Those 2 guys are gone like the wind. They're gone. And Keenan Lewis I expect to go too, because let's not forget, this is something a lot of people don't know. Keenan Lewis and Mike Wallace grew up in the same area and are very close friends. And I know they went to 2 different schools in 2 different parts of the country, but they ended up on the Steelers roster coming out the same year in the draft in 2009. I guarantee if Wallace goes somewhere and they need a corner, he'll be more than happy to go too. Keenan Lewis had what was a borderline Pro Bowl year in the AFC at corner. But unbelievable, he locked down almost every receiver he went against, because he went against number 2s a lot. He locked them down. We know Ike Taylor's going back, and he's probably got a year or 2 left in him. But what are we going to do at corner? What are we going to do at wide receiver? And what are we going to do at running back without those guys back? I mean, as much as I dislike Mendenhall, and when he was actively playing, he produced for this football team. As much as I don't like him, he produced. Mike Wallace, never was really into this season. I think this season was a wasted year for him. He won't come back because the Steelers are not going to pay him what he wants. The Steelers probably aren't going to pay him more than $5 million a year, and Wallace wants Larry Fitzgerald money, which is $120 spaced over 8 years. Mike Wallace isn't even worth half what Larry Fitzgerald is. Not even close. Then, of course, you have, Keenan Lewis at corner. Keenan had a very, very good year. Finally getting a chance to crack the starting lineup since guys like Willie Gay left and guys like Brian McFadden aren't there anymore. He's had a chance to be a playmaker, and, he may not have had a lot of interceptions, but he was very, very good at covering. Believe me, with the salary cap being what it is, the fact that they have got so many free agents, I'm very concerned about the Steelers next year. Believe me, I am. Yes, I know you have Ben Roethlisberger and Antonio Brown, guys that can make plays on offense. And you got Emmanuel Sanders who's a good player. And you've got an offensive line that when they're all healthy and they can gel together as a unit, they are young, but they could potentially grow up to be one of the best leagues in the league in about 2 or 3 years. That's a real bright spot for this football team. The defense, honestly, I don't think is in as bad a shape as people think. They want to say it is. Well, guess what? I know you lose Harrison, but, seriously, other than a couple of games where he played really well this year, he did absolutely nothing all year. I know his knee injury prevented that, but, a healthy Jason World is a better option than Harrison at this point. Lamar Woodley be back and healthy. You've got Timmons. And the inside, you're going to get guys like Spence and Sylvester, who are very, very good players in college, and I think they can make the transition to the 3-4 in the NFL, particularly Sean Spence. It's just a shame he had the knee injury last year in that preseason game. Steve McClendon will finally be taking over at nose tackle for Casey Hampton. McClendon is just like Casey Hampton, but he's stronger. You've got Brett Kiesel, who's still as good as he ever was. You've got that old man strength. You've got the upcoming Cameron Hayward behind him. And you got Ziggy Hood on the other end. The defense is going to be okay. because Cortez Allen and Curtis Brown can rotate in a corner. You're going to get Troy back healthy. Clark's still there, and Ike Taylor's there. Yes, they're old, but they're experienced and they're smart. And if Dick LeBeau finally decides to be more aggressive with his defense, something they have not been the last 2 years, maybe they'll actually make some plays. The defense will probably still be in the top 10 in the league when it comes to year's end. The problem with me is the offense. The projected starting lineup on offensive line next year for the Steelers, I can't tell you who they're going to really start. I don't know who the projected starters are going to be. I mean, I know you got David DeCastro finally be able to play a full year because he missed half the year last year, with his knee injury. You've got Marquise Pouncey in the center, who's just a beast. You've got Marcus Gilbert in the right tackle, who's a very, very good player. Very, very underrated in his style of play. Was one of the better picks, I thought, in recent years for the Steelers, because when he played at right tackle, he was very, very good. I mean, it's kind of funny because, the Steelers were a team that I felt last year, their ceiling was 12-4. And, if you look at who they're supposed to have on the offensive line next year, their projected offensive line is this. Mike Adams in his second year. You have David DeCastro, he'll be in his second year. Marcus Gilbert will be in his third year. Marquise Pouncey will be in his fourth year. And who's going to start at the other guard with Willie Colon not there? Kelvin Beachum, the late round pick in the draft last year, who filled in admirably, even though he didn't play particularly well. He still played his ass off for the Steelers whenever other guys were hurting that line. So that offensive line is going to be young and they're going to be inexperienced. So that's going to be tough for Ben because he's probably going to... I say over the next 2 years, Ben's going to get sacked a lot. I do, because the fact that the line, they may be talented, but they're raw and they're young. And when you have an offensive line that young without really any real veteran leadership, it's tough for them to gel as a unit. I mean, you saw what happened the year after Faneca left. They didn't have any real veterans on that line, and you saw that they just weren't very good. Now, if I were to break it down each position, quarterback position, get a more secure backup for Ben, that'll be okay. Ben will be good at quarterback. Running back, Dwyer and Redmond will probably be back next year. And I think the Steelers will probably take a running back in the draft, maybe mid to late. They're trying to move to a zone blocking scheme with you have guys like Gilbert, DeCastro, and Pouncey. I think that really benefits them because they're quicker. So that'll help the running game a lot because you see what the zone blocking scheme does in Washington. It does the same there what it did in Denver under Mike Shanahan. Just opens up lanes and just churns out 1,000-yard rushers. They have the receiving core that's going to be severely hampered by the loss of Wallace. I mean, you can say whatever you want about his production with his stats. Wallace was the most important part of that receiving core only because of the fact that Antonio Brown and Emmanuel Sanders didn't start to make plays in 2011 or in 2012 until Wallace started getting double teamed. Yes, Wallace's production completely deteriorated, but Brown and Sanders just started to make plays like crazy. So they're going to be covered now with possibly two guys at a time, and that's not a winning proposition for the Steelers. Brown's good, but he's not good enough to consistently beat double teams. Tight end, I think Heath Miller will be back. Hell yeah. The offensive line I broke down, they're going to be in a tight spot. The defensive line is actually one of the bright spots in this team because Ziggy Hood had a pretty good year last year. It seemed like he was a little stronger at the point of attack. You get McClendon in, who's going to be just like a plug in the middle for the 3-4, and that's going to be tough for any center/guard to keep up with. Then on the other end, you've got Kiesel and working in Cameron Hayward. So you've got a young defensive line that could potentially be very, very solid. The linebacking core, though, is where I'm a little concerned. Because I know Woodley's been hurt the last few years. He's not been able to stay healthy. Timmons was, in my opinion, the biggest Pro Bowl snub last year because he had an unbelievable year at defense. He's the only guy in defense last year that really didn't suck at all. Ryan Clark had a great year, but and Keenan Lewis, but Timmons was a contributor game in and game out for that football team. Game in and game out, he made plays. There wasn't a game where he was invisible. He was making tackles everywhere on the field all year last year. He'll probably play alongside Sean Spence, who's a guy who, when he played in Miami, was a very, very good player. Really screwed up his knee in preseason last year for the Steelers. I think that's a very good fit in Dick LeBeau's defense. And speaking of Dick LeBeau, please, make some plays on defense. It's not the players. It's the scheme you're running. It's kind of funny. The Steelers in 2007, 2010 were running an aggressive defense. One where they went after the 2007, 2008, and 2010. They ran an aggressive defense. They were going for the ball. They were going to go for sacks. They were going to try to get takeaways. And they were still stopping teams. And two of those three teams made it to the Super Bowl. One of them won it, and all three made the playoffs. 2009, 2011, 2012. They decided to play more conservative, more reserved, not get so much beat, but then again, not get turnovers, but then again, not get beat as much. Look what happened. No playoff wins and two teams that missed the playoffs. Scheme's not the issue. My bad. The players are not the issue. The scheme is the issue. They got to get more picks. Speaking of picks, the unit that really underperformed last year was the defensive backfield. I know two of the players in that defense, Clark and Keenan Lewis, played remarkably well. But, I'm talking about not in terms of overall impact tackling and covering. I'm talking about taking the football away. It seems like that entire secondary has the same problem. They just can't catch. And everybody knows what a cornerback is, or a safety. A wide receiver who can't catch. It's kind of funny. Ike Taylor could have probably had 50 career interceptions with how many he drops. He drops like one every game. Keenan Lewis dropped a few. Ryan Clark dropped a few. Troy doesn't really drop any, but he didn't play a whole lot last year. Will Allen played well. He played well in his absence. Ryan Clark makes some plays, but the Steeler defense can't afford to be having a piss-poor turnover differential and expect to win. If they're not, they're going to score at least 30 points on the offensive side of the football. The Steelers play the most confusing game style of any team in the NFL. They're so confusing because you have a defense that is suited to go for the football, go for the quarterback, take the ball away, and get sacks, but they decide to sit back and not let the other team get big plays and just, get dinked and dunked to death and ultimately lose. You have a quarterback you can make an argument for Ben Roethlisberger as one of the 4 or 5 best quarterbacks in this league. It'd be a valid argument. And yet the Steelers still refuse to utilize his talents. Believe me, if I ran the Pittsburgh Steelers, I would say to my coaching staff, you let Ben run the game. Because he's on the field. He's not a washed-up offensive coordinator who doesn't know how to call plays without having his head up his ass. Todd Haley. Some of the play calling last year from Todd Haley was just so asinine. They ran the football in the dumbest situations. My biggest problem with the Steelers, honestly, the salary cap is a big issue, but it's not the roster. If a couple of guys step up and make some plays, this team in 2013 could potentially win 10 games. Could. But several things have to happen within their minds for them to make the switch. The biggest problem I have with this team, of course, is the scheme they play on defense. They don't go for the football. They sit back. They wait for you to make a mistake instead of trying to cause one. You look at the last few Super Bowl champions, the Ravens, the Giants, even the Saints and the Packers. None of those 4 teams possessed a particularly great defense. I'm talking the season they played.
The Ravens up till then had had some great defense, but I'm talking about the season they played statistically. Well, what were they all very, very good at doing? Hitting the quarterback and taking the ball away. That's the blueprint now in the NFL. It's not to play, conservative and not give up plays. The goal is to hit the quarterback and take the ball away. And on offense, these 4 and 5 yard passes, these bubble screens, what the hell? I've said it so many times about the Steelers. You have the 4th or 5th best quarterback in the National Football League. A guy who, if he wins another Super Bowl, is a slam dunk Hall of Famer in Ben Roethlisberger. A guy who, if he even has a few more great seasons and doesn't win a Super Bowl, he's still a Hall of Famer. And you don't utilize his talents. When the Ravens came into the NFL in 1996, when they were in their inception, they modeled themselves out of the Steelers. Run the football, okay at best quarterback play, and punishing defense. Now look at it from 2011 on. The Ravens, the reason why they've been to a championship game and won a Super Bowl, and the Steelers have not won a playoff game in the last 2 years, is this. The Steelers play like they do in the 70s. They try to run the ball and play defense. And that really doesn't work anymore in the NFL. You can make an argument to the 49ers, yes, but they play, it's a little bit of a different story because they have the personnel to do that. The Steelers don't have the personnel to run the football and play defense. It's different when you have Frank Gore versus Redmond, Mendenhall, and Dwyer. You have a receiving core that is pretty good, even without Wallace. I mean, it sucks to lose him. You lose a lot of things on your defense, your offense, a lot of plays, and you got guys that get covered more. But still, you got Sanders, Brown, Cotchery, Pim Miller. You got a good, decent receiving core. One of the top 10 in the league. And you're trying to run the football down the other team's throat. If you're running into the line for 3 yards to carry, what is so scary? What is the defense so afraid of? That you might possibly run into the line for 4 yards to carry? Todd Haley, Mike Tomlin logic. And speaking of Mike Tomlin, for God's sakes, Mike Tomlin, clean up the penalties and the turnovers. The Steelers were never noted for being a penalty-laden team. They were always known for playing clean, physical football. But they've been flagged so much lately because when you fumble as many times as they fumble, and when you commit as many holding calls as you do, eventually the coach has got to think, maybe there's a problem we got to fix here. That's never apparently dawned on Tomlin or Art Rooney II, who insists that there's no problem with the Steelers' mentality. And I'm the one watching the damn games knowing that there's a mentality issue. I can see something from my couch, whether it be 30 minutes away if they're playing at Pittsburgh or 1,000 miles away if they're playing on the road. I can see things from this team. I can see things going on the field with this team. But apparently the coaches who are 25 yards away from the players can't see themselves. And that's not a good thing. I just had to get that off my chest. Hope you guys enjoyed that. I'll be doing random shows every now and then, news and notes, just to try to keep you guys up to date. Got tennis coming up, and I hope to talk about that. But anyways, thank you guys for listening. James Wisniewski here on Real Steel Sports, signing off.